Okay, we're going to get started. Pua's ready, and this is the Woodbridge Board of Selectmen regular meeting of Wednesday, February 10th, 2016. Welcome, everyone. The first item on our agenda is public comments. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing no one, we will move to item... Oh.
Oh, it is by our call here.
Sorry. Deke, did you want to make a comment?
Deke Hotchkiss,
25 Fairgrounds Road, Woodbridge. I'm also the chair of the Country Club of Woodbridge Commission.
Just to be clear, Deke, are you, is your public comment on behalf of the commission or just yourself as an individual?
Personally,
as an individual.
Yeah. Okay. I am sharing with you certain information reported by Billy Casper Golf on its results for operating the golf course at the Country Club of Woodbridge in 2015. Net income of $158,000 before a revenue sharing payment to the town, a 99% increase from 2014. A revenue sharing payment to the town of $50,171, an increase of $44,000 from 2014. Golf rounds of 31,826, an increase of 15% from 2014 and 34% from 2012, which was its first year of operation. More than $150,000 raised by charities due to events hosted at the club. $26,000 of rounds given to charities for silent auctions and other fundraising activities. 11,000 of golf rounds given to the Amity Regional High School golf team for practices and matches, and $6,945 in personal property taxes paid on golf carts to the town of Woodbridge. We have completed several projects that came up for consideration in the town's capital budget process. These projects were valued at approximately $50,000 in the draft budget and obviously no longer need to be considered for funding. Regarding the pool, a closing would have an estimated $30,000 negative effect on golf revenues if the food and beverage operator stayed in place. If not, the effect would be worse. Please remember that the town gets 50% of these revenues.
Excuse me, I'm not clear on something. Are you quoting Billy Casper Golf still?
With respect to what?
Well, you started out saying this is a report from Billy Casper Golf. I'm not sure when that ended, if it did, or you're still saying this is what Billy Casper Golf said.
I'm not quoting Billy Casper Golf. I'm quoting from information that they provided.
Oh, they told you this last item, that's from Billy Casper. It's all information. I'm just trying to clarify. This is all data from Billy Casper. Is that right? I didn't follow that.
You said that Billy Casper said that we would lose $30,000 if we closed the pool. That's from Billy Casper.
Yes.
That they would lose $30,000.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to be clear that these are Billy Casper. Okay. It's all Billy Casper information.
Yeah, I mean, I just need to,
yeah.
I guess, figure out, if you want me to segregate those, the comments, I'll have to think about how to do that. But in any event, just to go on, Billy Casper Golf is offered to market the pool. I would recommend that you extend their marketing responsibilities to the banquet tent. This is a product that could generate $30,000 a year in revenues, but is not being marketed. I guess this is not Billy Casper information now, or just whatever. Also, I penned an analysis why operating CCW could cost the town $0 in 2017. It is available through the Conserve Woodbridge and Woodbridge Alliance web pages on Facebook. The essence is, firstly, with the growth in revenues, the scheduled decline in loan payments, and the favorable competitive position, an operator could run the golf in 2017 without any guaranteed payments from the town. The remaining $80,000 or so of cost that the town might have is the cost to run the clubhouse. I believe that this could easily be covered by a restoration of the business at the pool and an expansion of the business at the tent. Lastly, on the building. At the January 26th meeting of the Recreation Commission, John Adamovich stated that he felt that the rec department functions scheduled to go to the old firehouse should go to the CCW building. Having the fitness center at CCW would enable CCW to offer a more attractive membership and achieve higher membership revenues. Equally, the rec department fitness center would benefit from added revenues from the CCW members. In addition, its product would also be enhanced by becoming a fitness center with shower facilities, which should enable it to achieve higher revenues. Lastly, the dollars committed to improve the old firehouse would address a significant majority of the building issues at the CCW clubhouse. I hope that you will consider this option. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Amy Morella, 184 Raymond Road. I'm here to express my disappointment that you continue to avoid public input as you pursue plans to construct housing on the Woodbridge Country Club. This fall, you held several meetings about both the status of the country club and new proposals from Toll Brothers for residential housing on the site. In none of these meetings did you offer an opportunity for public comment. Selectman Maria Kane pointed out this gap in December and urged you to seek public input before proceeding further. You ignored her. For the past 2 months, you have continued to avoid public input while presumably continuing discussions with Toll Brothers. Now I've learned that you are scheduling 2 special meetings with various town commissions to inform their members about potential development. Why are you talking to your appointed commissions rather than all of the residents that you represent? As you know, the country club was a hot topic in 2015 throughout this town. Clearly, Ellen, you heard something that caused you to back away from the then current proposal from Toll Brothers. Unfortunately, you're pursuing new plans without any solicitation of ideas from townspeople. I believe our fellow residents would offer very interesting comments on the latest Toll Brothers proposals and offer alternative ideas worth considering. And I believe that we'd be much more likely to reach a positive outcome for the country club property if you step back, hit pause, and sought the ideas, comments, and questions of the people you represent. While a public forum advertised to all residents would be the better venue in which to seek public input, there is still time to make a modest effort to hear from interested residents. You could direct all of the invited commissions to post agendas that specifically offer an opportunity for public comment. As you know, state law prohibits a board or commission from amending a special meeting agenda at the time of the meeting. Given the record of the strong resident interest in the future of the country club and your failure to seek input so far, you should anticipate that members of the public will try to attend and comment at these 2 special meetings. I urge you to direct the various commission chairs to include public comment on their agendas. Thank you.
Good evening. Adrian Michi Smith, 17 Ansonia Road. Well, first of all, I'd like to second Ms. Morella's comments. I would like as much public access to whatever conversation is taking place about the Woodbridge Country Club as possible. There's no secret about the fact that I am very upset about the possible development of that property. Secondly, I understand that there's going to be a zoning update by Attorney David Grogans today. Is that correct? And I understand that he's going to address the legal aspects of possible zoning changes, and I'd like to know if his written opinion will be available to the public.
I'll answer the question, yes, it will.
How will that be, how will the public be able to access that?
Just call town hall and ask for it.
I'm
If you
sorry?
just call town hall and ask for it. We received, I will answer this
So
question.
it won't be published in any way?
I actually don't, we could publish it. We received this opinion yesterday. Unfortunately, we couldn't send it out. Our email has been down, but it is a public document that will be available to any member of the
If you
public.
just call town hall, correct?
You can call town hall, we can put it on our website. It's a
That would
public
be
document.
wonderful.
It's a public document,
Okay.
not to be concerned.
I think it would be great if it went on the public website. Thank you very much.
I'm Martha German of 1170 Johnson Road, and I came to express a concern that has arisen in the past couple of days over the possibility that the pool at the Woodbridge Country Club might be closed. If there is to be a vote on this issue, I hope that you would take into account a statement of concern signed by 45 residents in the last couple of days. The statement says this: "We, the undersigned residents of Woodbridge, are expressing our desire to keep the pool at the Country Club of Woodbridge open and operational for the 2016 season." So I hope you will put that into your calculations as you make your decision. Thank you.
Michael Broderick, 5 Old Still Road. I wanted to express also my concern about keeping the pool open. After touring the Woodbridge Country Club facility, I realized that the building is not a throwaway building. It's a building of architectural merit that the town should be actually trying to preserve. It has, it's really a very distinguished structure, I think, by most architectural standards, and it seems our town is neglecting its upkeep. We're not doing the things that need to be done to maintain either the exterior or the interior, the leaking windows, and we've only addressed some of the leaking of the roofs. And I'd like to know why the Board of Selectmen is taking that position that it's not a very valuable asset worth protecting. It seems that it is a structure that could have many other uses, as were stated previously, and we should be diverting town money to preserving that instead of preserving things like the firehouse. And I think it's also incorrect, from reading the First Selectman's statement in the paper, that we need to sell the property to fund all these other things. You need to ask the town if we want to have a huge police station. A lot of people I talk to around town think we need no more police facility, and and they're very upset when you tell them that's your excuse for selling the Woodbridge Country Club. And the other thing that I also think the town is not doing, and I don't know why, is you have a huge pesticide spill at the Woodbridge Country Club. This town operates on wells. This is a pesticide spill from your own report that could contaminate people's wells all over that area of town. And yet the town, under its ownership, has done nothing to mitigate it. And I'd like to ask the First Selectman, why is the town taking a chance with everybody's wells and contaminating the aquifer? Yes, I'm asking you a question.
Thank you. I'm not responding to your comments. I'm not getting into a back and forth with you, but I can assure you they will be responded to. Is there anyone else for public comment?
Robert Hopkins, 34 Old Mill Road. I find it a little extremely upsetting that there's been limited communication to the residents of Woodbridge about what's going on with the pool, and that I'm finding this out through Facebook. After looking on the website, the town website, several times, there was nothing about this meeting about the pool and an update, as you said. An update is different than a closing. You're not fully
There's nothing on the agenda this evening about the pool.
There's an
You're
update
here to
about the
speak,
country
but
club.
there's nothing about the pool on the agenda this evening, just to be clear.
There's an update about the country club. That
There's
should be
two
fully,
specific items about the country club, but there's nothing about the pool.
it should fully be disclosed to the town residents, and it hasn't been. And that's bad as administrators.
Okay, thank you. I got- Okay, oh.
Bob Hill, 68 Acorn Hill Road.
Can't hear you.
Bob Hill, 68 Acorn Hill Road. I left the tomatoes home. Okay. All right. I noticed that David Stein is on the agenda to address some of the Silver Petroselli report, and I guess strategically what we may be doing with that. I'm not sure the whole background of it. I guess the idea is to get a clear understanding of that report. And I can only surmise when that report was requested and completed in December 2011, it was at the point that the town, I think we're taking it back from MDM, I think, and so we're looking at what kind of improvements we may have to make. And in looking at that overall close to 50-page report, the impression it gives me is the impression of a remodeling program or a restoration program bringing the entire facility to almost a new condition type situation. I think we know today, based on if we were to save the building, which I happen to be one of those people that think that repurposing the building in some way is a good idea and not losing the asset. So I'm kind of pleased to hear some of the, positive comments about saving the building. And yeah, John Adamovich did make, actually, in our meeting, he made a public comment. He actually stepped away from his desk and said, geez, he'd be happy if Recreation went over there, which could be a good alternative, especially with the senior center and some other things that go along with that. However, in looking at that report, there's a lot of things in that report that are kind of, in terms of we're looking to preserve and then looking long-term, that would be NA. Replacing the carpeting, because that's down the road. Obviously, the roof is the first and most important thing.
Can I make a suggestion? Are you here to comment on David Stein's report that he previously did?
But once
Because if that's what you want to do, why don't you wait to hear his report tonight, and after that, maybe next time, come and tell us what you think, because I think that would be better to hear the update, rather than go through the report.
I'm not going to go through the whole report. I'm only going to make a couple quick comments about it that just more, looking at it from 5,000 feet above. One of the issues was it said they were going to look at the codes and whatever needs to be brought in compliance, and there's close to $375,000 in parking expense, and then later in the report it says the code for the parking needs to be researched. I thought that's what they did. So I think they were talking about additional parking, some repair of the parking. It's a lot of money for parking. There were a number of items in there that made me pause a little bit. Cleaning out the apartment upstairs. It's a very small apartment. The apartment's smaller than half of this room, which basically be a half a day of volunteers kind of cleaning out what was there. There was $5,000 allocated for that. $3,000 to replace the hood, the cap for the swimmer's grill that Mr. Taddy, who's back there, did for $50. Paint the stairs, $5,000. He did it one weekend. So I think that if what he's doing now, and I'm not sure the direction of that, if it's strategically how to look at where the monies need to be spent if we save the building and how to plan and guide us in that, I think that's terrific. I think that's terrific if it's going that way. There was one comment in there that said the kitchen is inefficient. I've been in the kitchen. I have 40 years of restaurant and franchise experience. I wonder how that opinion was warranted to be given, not being a restaurant person. In regards to, off of that now, in regards to all the people that are so supportive of seeing the pool open, and obviously all the discussion about potentially closing does hurt us in membership. There's a very simple petition that you all can sign, okay, to save the pool. And that petition is sign up for membership, okay? You want to save the pool, and we lost a lot of members, and a lot of it is, there's a lot of reasons for it, okay? But if you want to save the pool, sign up for membership. That's a very simple way to save the pool, because if we're making money in the pool, okay, 2 years ago, we made a small amount of money. This past year, we lost money in the pool because we lost membership. Sign up, and, you know, I believe based on the conversations that have been happening here, I feel cautiously optimistic that the Board of Selectmen is going to decide to give us another year to operate the pool. I do feel that way. I think through the discussions that we've been having, I think that we're working towards a plan towards that. I don't know the conclusion, because I know you're all thinking about that, but the best thing all the residents can do to help save the pool, sign up, okay? The golf is going in the right direction. They've got it going. They've got it going to the point that we're getting more money back. And, you know, I'd love to be sitting here as a resident at the point where the whole thing is making money, and we say, hey, we don't have to worry about it. And then we'll work dealing with how do we deal with long-term capital plans. And I'll just throw out one other compromise thought for people to give thought to, which I'm sure those that don't want any development at all probably will not want to hear this. But it's a creative solution I'm going to throw out there. We have all these ideas going around about, you know, what should be, if there's development on the property, what it should be. And all of a sudden, it just hit me the other day. I said, wow, maybe the original proposal was the right proposal. And because it didn't change the golf course, we kept the country club, and maybe if those monies that would come from that were used to be put back into the building and the golf course, maybe everyone wins, because we don't have an overdeveloped situation, and we actually are able to preserve the building and everything that goes along with it. That would be a compromise, and we get, I mean, not everyone wants to hear any of that, but, you know, the way we're going with some of this, you know, I guess that there needs to be some compromise. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Okay.
Anyone else?
I just want to make a comment. I think possibly I've lived in this town longer than anybody else in the room. And I think it's terrible the way you're losing people from the pool. My opinion is you're losing people from that because from one day to the next, we have no clue what is going on with this situation. It's been for years, and you have not accomplished anything. You seem to be headed in one direction. Get Toll Brothers in there, and then sell the property. And this, I don't think, from all the meetings I have attended, this is not what the people in Woodbridge have been telling you and other administration before you. At this time or any time I've been at any of those meetings. I just think you're looking at it backwards.
Thank you, Edie.
You're welcome.
Good evening. I'm David Lober, 35 West Log Road. I will keep my comments exceedingly brief. I just have 3 points to make. Woodbridge is a small town. The things that make it great are its rural character, its educational excellence, and its opportunity for cultural and recreational activities. To that note, I would suggest, number one, I would urge the board to heed the unanimous vote of the Recreation Commission last month to keep the pool open. I would also urge the board to uphold what I feel is an obligation to preserve town publicly owned property, and that the clubhouse should be made watertight to prevent further water intrusion and deterioration. And three, I would again urge the Board of Selectmen to re-examine the proposed capital expenditures, notably the police station, which would increase our debt load and would pave the way for more public employees, which would also increase the cost to the town. And I understand that there are people who want the new police station, but the question is, do we need it, and should we spend the money? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for public comments?
Can I ask a question? Is it okay if I ask a question?
Yes, question.
Okay, I'm sorry, I know I already came up once. I just have a protocol question. A gentleman came up and talked about the pool closure, and and you told them that it wasn't on the agenda. Are we only supposed to address, I just don't know. I'm not trying to be a pain in the ass. I just don't know. Are we supposed to only address issues that are on the agenda?
No, he questioned why he wasn't aware of the pool being on the agenda. And I said, because it's not on the, you can talk about
Okay.
anything you want.
I missed that. I'm sorry.
I
Okay.
wanted to make clear that there was not something on the agenda that he missed. It wasn't on the agenda.
Got it.
And I'm
Thank you.
glad you clarified it. Thank you. Okay, we will, well, before we go on, let's just say I certainly take exception to many of the things that were said this evening, and many of them are inaccurate. The one thing I do agree with, and it's kind of strange, is with Amy Morella about hitting pause on the country club. And that's exactly what I've done. I hit pause so that we could regroup and establish the facts, so that we are not having discussion with everybody's own facts out there. We have spent many hours as the Board of Selectmen and with the Board of Finance to do that. And we will bring the facts to the public and have ample public conversation. Different commissions in town have asked for presentations and updates. Rather than ask Tony to go to 10 different commissions, we thought it would be much more efficient and certainly better use of Tony's time to bring them together to hear the presentations. I want to remind everyone that every one of these meetings is open to the public. Not everyone is open to public comment, but the public is welcome to be there. And there is ample public comment just about every month, sometimes more than once a month. There will be public meetings with respect to the future of the country club. And again, I am striving to the best of my ability to make sure that every discussion is based on facts. As we've been discussing here many times, everyone is entitled to his or her own opinion, but not to his or her own facts. And there have been many opinions stated this evening represented as facts. And we will be working very hard to establish a common base. I will note also on the 45 residents who signed a petition for the pool, I understand the pool is a very important issue. It's very important to many people. And interestingly, 45 people signed the petition. We have 45 Woodbridge residents who are members. So I want everyone to keep that in mind, that as we look at supporting the pool, what we want to pay for the pool, it is for 45 Woodbridge residents. That's not to say we couldn't have more people at the pool. Perhaps we can. This evening, we're going to hear an update on the building and on the clubhouse. People on this board have asked, what would it take to just mothball the building? Because at this moment, we may not have a use for it. Some of you think we do. I don't think you know the numbers. I don't think you know the square footage, but it's certainly something to think about. It's an expensive proposition to remake that building for a different purpose. But perhaps the wise thing to do is to keep the building, and we're going to hear the numbers this evening about what that would entail. This is not a simple issue. It's been around for some time, and I think it's very important that we continue our discussion in a respectful way and in a fact-based way. Talking about facts, unfortunately, Mr. Hotchkiss, who has written about the country club and the profits, has very strong feelings about it, but his facts are not supported by Billy Casper Golf. Billy Casper has told us unequivocally that to continue the contract after 2016 would require more than $100,000 contribution from the town. There are many more details we can get into about that. I will mention also that Billy Casper Golf has no interest in the pool. They will help us out managing it if we ask them to for a fee, but they do not feel it helps their golf operations. So I encourage all of you and everyone listening to be cautious about facts. And if you have a question, please call us at Town Hall anytime. We will check into questions that you have and we will get back to you. But I will not have a discussion based on opinions. We will now go to item number 2, which is Warren Connor's tree report. We're going to item number 2 now.
Good evening.
Good evening, Warren.
I'm just trying to give everybody a little update on what the UI's tree trimming program, the status of where they are and what they started, they had to do data collection on what trees and get permissions from property owners. They gave a preliminary list as an outline of where they would be originally to the town. That timeline has been amended because they got a late start in town. They did start some roads, but then they pulled out of town over several months. But basically, they started work last August. Roads that they've been working on, local roads, was Old Quarry, Peck Hill. They were working on Rimmon Road and Racebrook Road. They've done work on Country Club Drive and Beecher Road. I'm updating the first selectman on a weekly basis of what their schedule is, because I receive every Monday from them a tentative schedule. I also receive from them information about any objections or refusals that residents may provide the UI. That is important to the town, and it's important to me as tree warden. I do ride with both the UI and Lewis tree people, looking at any municipal trees that might have to be removed, and usually we're in agreement of what's being done. There's nothing of a notable nature out there. Most of the work, like on Country Club Drive, was all private work. They spent a lot of time there. They're coming near to the end, but there were no, or hardly no, municipal trees on that road. It was mostly all residential trees. They are going back onto Racebrook Road if Country Club Drive gets finished. There was a setback from the state work on Rimmon Road because the state arborist hadn't looked at all the trees or gave them permission, and that was a holdup why they didn't have continuity of working on Rimmon Road. So they were jumping around. You might see their vehicles out there, but they've been jumping around. As a road, my request has been, as a road gets completed on their list, that they notify me of that so that we can look at that. They're also going to revisit roads where they may have had refusals or objections. They're going to revisit those certain circuits in 4 years, because that's their timeline of going back and doing a certain work. What I have witnessed, I'm in agreement with anything that they are removing. They do tag the trees, and like I said, I ride and look at every single tree that's being removed. They provide me an extensive list. It's too big to actually bring or republish, but I do receive all the objection notices and refusals before they do any work. If any resident has a concern that they might be trimming a tree that they're unhappy with, they can call me. I can come and look at the tree, even if it's on a state road, because I have done that for several residents already. So they are continuing with their program, even though it got off to a late start. They should be increasing the crews and the timelines coming, with the warmer weather.
Have there been many objections? Have you had to deal with
There are objections and there are refusals, and the UI in Lewis Tree is working with those residents and honoring their requests.
Good, okay. Questions for Warren? Maria?
I have a question. I called you once upon a time because I'm familiar with tree problems, having attended the Hamden Tree Organization thing, and because neighbors of mine called me and said, Maria, did you notice the trees that on Cedar Road?
Yes, I do.
And your answer was, I don't know, I don't have them on my list. And I think, and then you came back and said that they are maybe used for survey demarcations or something like that. I don't understand what
Right, at that time when you called me,
Right.
there was a request from a resident on that road that wanted all of the trees removed from the frontage of his property.
All right.
They did not get removed. The trees that were identified and marked for removal were risky trees. They were failing and they were taken down. There were other trees further down the street that were marked for different purposes that were not taken down.
But your answer at that time was...
I didn't have any knowledge of the ribbons that you were talking about. The resident came out on his own and demarcated trees that he wanted removed.
It was his it was his markings?
Those were his ribbons that were put on the tree. I found that out after our conversation.
Right,
And all of the trees that were marked were not taken down.
Right. According to your comments tonight, the UI does a lot of the tree cutting in town, correct?
Yes,
The state does its part too.
yes, they've been doing work.
You have requests for, I don't know how many thousands of dollars to cut more trees. Where are those trees?
Those are all the budgetary requests are local trees that are being worked on that differ from the UI tree trimming program. However, their program is saving the town a lot of money because there are diseased trees in town,
Right.
And the trees that they are removing are on them as far as cost goes and not the town. So my funding request has to deal with what are municipal trees, and they have nothing to do with the line clearance.
I guess the other question is, where are these municipal trees that you're talking about?
They're on every single road in town. There's a problem with certain species of trees, and those trees are being identified and removed as the disease progresses in those trees. And as I indicated in the funding request, that there will be probably an increase in the activity of tree removals due to the progression of the disease.
Are those the ash trees?
Yes.
I'm aware of the ash tree thing, but I just, unlike New Haven apparently you can go to the website of New Haven, and you can go to a street, and they can identify the trees.
If I had a tree inventory in town and I had those capabilities, I could do the same thing.
I understand, but my question is, where are these municipal trees? I would love to go around and see them, just to make
Anything
sure.
that's been on my list for this past year, I've got maybe 3 trees in town that have not been addressed to date. That's not to say that a week or a month from now that there won't be more additional trees identified that will need additional funding to be removed. But they're all over town. If you want to come into my office, I can show you a list of where we've worked.
I just want to understand where the budget amount is coming from, and maybe that would help me. Thank you so much.
Well,
will
I do
that.
a request, and any tree that's been identified, I solicit quotes on the tree for removal. And that's what establishes the use of those funds.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to go with you and show me some example of that.
Sure.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I just have a very quick question, if it's okay. Sure.
Are you going on every single street in every street in
Right now,
the whole town of Woodbridge?
Are you talking about municipal trees that I deal with, or what the UI?
Maybe I should back up. Define, if you could, because I just don't understand it. What is a municipal versus a residential, I guess, tree? What's
It's the setback from the
Setback,
road.
okay.
If it's from road's edge, a certain distance going into the property, and that's where the UI, we're using a rule of 10 feet. But every property has a different setback. That's where they have to come to me, and I make the ruling on whether it's a municipal tree or not.
Okay.
But they still have to contact every property owner, whether it's in the town's jurisdiction or private jurisdiction, to obtain permission to work, either prune or remove the tree. If the condition of the tree is subject to doing damage, and a lot of, I mean, as far as the residents go, the permissions have been fantastic. There's some objections. The UI is working around those parameters, but what they do is they're out having, Lewis Tree is going out pre-identifying trees. So there may be markings, and some of the residents may have had those contact slips provided to them, and then they see no activity. That's because they're doing the field work of identifying the thing, and the crews can't do the removals as fast as they can do the identification. They are doing it by circuits, though. The UI is planning their work based on the type of circuit. They will be doing anything where there's power supply in town.
Okay. So this is sort of a process, as I understand it. It's begun. And how long is it going to continue? Is it?
It's going to be, well, they have to do all the circuits in town. It will be years.
Thank you.
And then they're going to be cycling back.
I understand.
They have a timeline where they come back and do it
Right.
again.
And if a resident has a concern about a specific tree and whether or not it's commercial or residential, should they call UI or call you, or?
Well, the UI is notifying them, and they're being target
they have-
specific.
if-
If they have a question, they can certainly call me.
Call you, okay.
Now, if it's within the state's jurisdiction, I refer them to the state arborist.
And what defines whether it's in the state's jurisdiction?
If it's on a state road.
State road, thank you. Okay, great. I'm doing this more for
Right.
public information.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Sorry to take your time up.
Before I just get back to the UI, I just want to verify the program that we were told, and it sounds like they're living up to it. Not only if someone refuses or objects once they get their slip, but until the UI, if they identify trees and they have to come put a slip on your door, and until they hear back from you to get permission to do that tree, unless
They don't do
emergency,
any work.
They will not do any work. So they have not been doing any work that residents don't know about or haven't been informed about on residents.
They may identify the tree, and they may put a small identifier on the tree, but they don't do any work, and the
Until
work,
they get your-
they have a schedule, and that schedule comes to me before Lewis Tree comes in on behalf of the UI to do any work. And like I said, the work that I've witnessed, it's been highly beneficial to the town as far as preserving power in those areas, and the residents have been very cooperative. I think I've had 2 phone calls where there's been a question, they might have cooperated with it, and then, or not, but if the UI has an objection, they're letting it go unless there's an immediate need for that tree to come down.
Can I just have a question also? Sure. So I remember the UI presentation very well. I think we all kind of had a little bit of a skeptical eye about
Right.
all of this and what it was going to lead to. But one of the things I remember very clearly was they said that in some cases they would prune a tree, and in some cases they would remove a tree.
That is correct.
And just based on my observation on Rimmon Road, and this may be the owner's preference, it seems like everything that is being touched by the operators is being removed rather than pruned back. I'm not seeing a lot of those half decimated trees
Well,
that you sometimes
and
see.
again, that goes into the factors of what the general condition of the tree,
Right.
what liabilities it may pose.
Right.
And that's where it's advantageous from my perspective, that if the tree is dying or will die soon, that tree be removed. It's safer and beneficial, not only for from the state's perspective, any motorist that travels the road is better off.
Right.
But they are pruning where necessary. But because of the disease that's in a lot of these trees,
Right.
And I've had residents I've met, one person had an extensive frontage, and I looked at every single tree and it took them probably 6 months before they got to do the work. But they took a lot of trees
And
down
was that on a state road?
on the state road. Some of them were on intersections that abutted our roads.
Right.
And I had the opportunity to take those off the list because the UI did the work, not the town.
I understand that.
Now, there was, because of the delay from the state arborist identifying the trees and getting permissions, there was a lag on a section of Rimmon Road, basically between Fountain Street and Racebrook Road, that they couldn't come and do the work because they didn't have the permissions. Under the state law, they can intervene after so many days and go in there with the residents' consent. I had residents say, hey, I got this notice from the UI and they haven't been here. And I said, well, be patient because they had to move down the road and they're working in the other direction.
All of, just by way of summary, all of which is to say, it sounds like there's more removal than pruning going on. Is that, would you agree with that?
And again, probably, and some of that because of the size of the trees that they're
Right,
working
right.
on or the general condition,
Right.
proximity to the wires.
I understand that.
And stuff like that. But there are removals.
Okay.
The pruning, in the scope of things, it might be a small amount, but it depends on what the tree and around the clearance that their objective is.
Right.
And then what the permissions that I've had people call me and say the UI is going to prune this tree, but I'd rather have it removed. Can you contact the UI? And I've done that.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Anything else?
Well, I just wanted to, my concern maybe when I asked you a question, that question about the trees is because, I was concerned about your budgetary request. If UI is doing a lot of work, the state is doing a lot of work, if it's within residents' properties, it's privately owned. I just wanted to find out what other trees need to be taken out and why. What are these municipal trees?
My budget is just with the municipal trees. It has nothing to do with private trees.
Okay, I just wanted.
And it's nothing to do with the line clearance.
So I think you've made the request, it's a very good question, and you'll connect with Warren and take a look at the list and how it
Excellent.
works.
Thank you
Because
so
not
much.
everything falls within the UI program that we may think needs removal.
Right.
Because we might remove it for different reasons.
Right.
So I think we'll
It's
get
good
the
to
rest
know
of it.
that. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank
All
you.
right.
If there's no objection by the board, I'd like to switch items 4 and 3 so we can have the country club presentations. Louisa Cunningham has graciously agreed to that change. Is there any objection? No. Okay, seeing none, we will go to the Country Club of Woodbridge update. Attorney David Grogans is here, I believe. I just saw him.
Yeah, he's out there.
Attorney Grogans, we're ready. And Jerry, you have copies of the letter, please. Again, to the Board of Selectmen, we couldn't send this to you yesterday because our email has been down, but good evening.
Good evening.
Before we begin, I do want to say that one of the very serious issues that has come, excuse me, Warren and Cheryl, if you don't mind, take the conversation outside. One of the serious issues that has come up with respect to potential plans for the country club property is what plans might come up that would require a zoning change, and if they did, what would the impact of that zoning change be on future changes in ownership of the country club property and as precedent setting for other parcels in town. These are very important issues. It was first raised as a question of spot zoning, and we had a legal opinion regarding spot zoning, which has been widely distributed. People have seen them, we've discussed it, and there's no issue about spot zoning. But the very specific issues that I think are at the core of people's concerns, and I say justifiably so, are first, if some development were permitted on this property and there was a zone change to allow it, what would prevent future owners from doing something different on the property? And again, secondly, if some development were allowed on this property, would that mean that other properties could be similarly developed? And I think those really are the core of people's concerns, very legitimate, and we have asked Attorney Grogans from Cohen & Wolf to take a look at this. He has looked at this issue for other towns. He is known for his expertise in the area. We have the written opinion, which you now have, and we'll be happy to post on the website for everyone to see. And I thought this evening, if you could walk us through your thinking and your conclusions, it would be very helpful for our town. Thank you for coming.
I would be glad to. Just for some background, I've been practicing with Cohen & Wolf for almost 40 years now. During that period, I've been town attorney for the town of Newtown for over 25 years. I've been town attorney for the town of Ridgefield for 15 years. I served as town attorney for Brookfield, and I've been practicing in municipal law for a substantial amount of time. I was contacted by the first selectman with regard to a matter I had handled for Ridgefield, which is somewhat similar to the situation that you have here, whereas the town purchased a piece of property and as part of the plan for that piece of property, it contracted with an outside developer to develop a certain part of the property. Other parts are going to be kept as open space, and the other 18 or so acres that's left is as a point of discussion in the town at the present time. But I was contacted because I had faced some of these similar issues for Ridgefield, and I was asked to look at two specific questions. The first question was, as the first selectman has indicated, with regard to what, assuming there's going to have to be some zone change for this property, if it's going to be developed. And again, that's assuming, because I am not aware of any specific. Oops.
Somebody hit their Siri button.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought somebody was.
Somebody's purse is talking to Siri.
Okay. Anyway, getting back to the point that I was asked to look at, or the points. The first one is, again, what sort of precedent would be established in the town if the town were to change this particular property to a zone which would allow the development of some form of cluster housing. And I use that term very generically. We're talking about multiple family housing, cluster housing. I mean, I'm not limiting this to one particular type of multiple family housing, but just generally.
And, what would be the effect or precedential effect of such a change on other properties in town? Because at the present time, except in, as I understand it, the Village District, there's really no allowed cluster housing in town. So, and then the second question was really, what can the town do in the event it decides to change the zone of this particular property to protect itself in the event that, for example, it sells it to one developer and that developer decides to, what they call, flip it to another developer. So let me get to the first question, and it's really pretty fundamental in terms of zoning law. And that's what's the authority of the zoning commission, because you're really talking about a change in zone. And when a zoning commission looks at a proposal to change a zone, it's acting in what they call its legislative capacity. When it hears an application for a particular development or whatever, it's acting in its administrative capacity. And the standards are significantly different. When a zoning commission acts in its legislative capacity, it essentially has almost unfettered discretion, like the legislature would have. It could take up any type of topics and can sculpt these or shape the property as it sees in the best interest of the community. But it isn't unlimited. It is not unlimited authority. When it does this, it has to follow there are certain rules. One of which I discussed in the letter that I submitted on this is the application of what they call the Plan of Conservation and Development, which is a statutorily mandated requirement for every town. Every 10 years, the town must look at its housing stock and the way it's been developing and address issues that have occurred in that period and look to the following 10 years as to how it would plan to develop the same or differently than had been done in the past. And in the case of Woodbridge, the Plan of Conservation and Development was recently changed. 2015, there were amendments, and one particular section, which is particularly helpful and useful in terms of looking at this question, is that the golf course property was mentioned, and specifically there was a discussion of the potential to develop that for, again, cluster multifamily housing. So when a zoning commission is going to look at this issue, and it's going to develop a particular regulation for how that property would be developed, and there are many ways to do that. I mean, it can simply change the zone, and I know people have looked at the issue of spot zoning, but this is a fairly large piece of property, and I think the conclusion, and I agree with it, that was reached in the prior opinion letter was that unlikely that such a change would result in an issue of spot zoning, which is again would not be legal under Connecticut law. So in this situation, the fact that you have a Plan of Conservation and Development, you have a commission that essentially has a fairly degree of autonomy and latitude in how it can change zones. It would certainly be permitted and would be able to withstand a challenge by outside parties, I mean members of residents of the town, but it would be able to withstand a challenge to the change of the property to a zone which would permit this type of development. And sort of the concomitant concept from zoning purposes is that if someone were to come in, another developer, after that fact and say, well, you changed the zone to multifamily on the golf course property, you've set a precedent. The precedent is that you're going to allow multiple family zoning, and we want you to change our parcel to the the same kind of a zone. And in this regard, there are a number of things, as I said, that are going to be important. Again, it's acting. The commission would again be acting in its legislative capacity because it's going to be asked to change a zone. And there's nothing really in the Plan of Conservation and Development that talks about multiple family housing in other areas of the town except for the village zone. So that those two factors together would support a decision on the part of the zoning commission, because those people would have to come to the zoning commission, in denying such an application. Because again, the commission is subject to the same standards, it has broad discretion, and it's following the Plan of Conservation and Development, and in doing such, the decision not to amend the zone to deal with or to allow for this type of housing would be supportable, and I think would have a great deal of the decision not to would be not be able to be attacked in a viable manner by a subsequent developer who wanted to change other parts of the town to use that concept. In addition, and this is important too, the way the zone is written is important, because by its very terms, the zone that could be created at the golf course would limit the type of properties that could be subject to that type of a zone, even though in our hypothetical, we're talking about first changing the zone of the property at the golf course to this, and then somebody coming in later and asking for a similar zone change. And what I'm talking about essentially is that there are several items that are important in terms of multiple family housing. One is the availability of municipal services such as sewer and water. Most multiple family housing would require that kind of the availability of that kind of service. Secondly, you could say that the zone, if it were created, would only apply to larger tracts of land. I don't know how many acres that are contemplated to be available for potential development on the golf course property, but the discussion, I think, has been in the 40 or 50 acre range, and as such that would be certainly limited. A limiting factor. The next point, I think, which is really important here, is that the access to such a property is important. And the zone for the golf course could be limited to properties that border on a state highway, which again is important because you can't. And you can, but it's often an issue of safety and concern of any zoning commission if the access is on a very small or non-paved or road which would not be suitable for heavy traffic. So by writing the zoning regulation relative to the golf course in such a way, it would have its own self-limiting factor. So again, I guess my conclusion in this is that such a change on the golf course property would not be a burden to the town in terms of other properties that could then be changed to similar type of cluster housing in the future. So I think the town's pretty well protected in that regard. The other question was, what can the town do to protect itself in the event that the property were again sold after you've discussed it with one developer. I know there's been some discussion with a developer who might be interested in 50 to 70 units of housing on it. And what we did in Ridgefield, and this is one of the reasons I think that the first selectman asked me to look at this, is in Ridgefield we had a similar problem, that there was a significant concern on the part of the townspeople that, this developer sounded very reasonable and their proposal was modest and fit within the concerns and of the town's citizens. But what if somebody else came in and they decided that they thought maybe 200 units would be a good idea? And there are statutes which would allow for that kind of thing. Not easily, but could allow for it. And in that regard, what we did in Ridgefield was we put private restrictions on the property. And what I mean by that is that this may be a concept that's familiar to some people and not to others, but the concept of contract zoning is something that is not permitted. And what contract zoning is essentially is where a commission makes a deal or enters into an agreement with a particular developer, saying that the developer will only develop the property in a certain way, and in that regard, the developer gets the approval that they're looking for those number of units of housing. Where the commission is only acting in its regulatory capacity and the town doesn't own the property, that would be illegal. But where the town owns the property, it can act in both capacity as a municipality and as a private landowner, which it is. And in that case, the town could say, as Ridgefield did, that if you're going to buy this property, before we make an agreement with you, you must submit to us a plan of development which may be not complete in its every aspect, i.e. you wouldn't know where the underground pipes would go and what every house would look like, but it would be a conceptual plan which would show so many units, and the development would be limited to the units that were shown and made part of the contract. In addition, we put a provision in that said that if the developer, within a certain time frame, and that's up to discussion and negotiation, decided to sell the property, sat on it for a while and decided to sell it, that it had to offer it back to the town before it could sell it to a third party. Finally, and this was, I think, significant, though it's a little bit esoteric in terms of zoning law, it was agreed that they could not apply to the Zoning Board of Appeals for what's called a variance to provide for a more dense housing development on there than they had originally agreed to. So those are all supportable in terms of zoning law. And because the town owns the property, it's in the unique position of being able to protect itself by the way it contracts, and that could also be put in the deed of conveyance and could run with the land, so to speak, that it would be applicable no matter who owned the property. It would act as a protection for the town from seeing a much more substantial and dense development on that parcel. So those were essentially the questions I was asked to look at, and I think the answer in both cases was that the town would be relatively well protected, both from the perspective of a subsequent zone change based upon the zone change at the golf course, and based upon a disposition of the property to a third-party developer who, decided to develop it in a way that might not be in line with what the townspeople wanted. That's essentially my position.
Questions? Anyone?
I have questions. So, if I hear you right, and I listened to some of the words you use carefully, such as unlikely to be considered spot zoning and should be able to withstand, obviously there's the risk that there's no guarantee here. We could be challenged. You're not offering that this is a fail-proof
no, but
opinion. This is a likely opinion.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to. be accused of being a lawyer on this, but that's what I am. And for me to say that there's no way in the whole world that this could happen would be foolish on my part. But the greater likelihood, and I mean substantial likelihood, is that the decisions that I was referring to would be upheld in a court of law.
Thank you.
Well, I just have a couple of things to say. What you said, everything you say is that assuming that we want, the people of the town of Woodbridge want a change in zoning. That's a big assumption. And then the other thing is, we also say that the zoning body or the zoning commission, with respect to their legislative capacity, will work for the best interest of the town. And the best interest of the town, who defines the best interest of the town? In this case.
Well, that's a standard that would be defined by case law and a court.
Okay,
Just, I'm sorry.
that's fine.
To Maria's point, that's right. The question to Attorney Grogan's was, should the town wish to allow some kind of housing on this property different from 1.5 acre large homes? What are the zoning issues? Because it's been raised many times, and here again, it's so that we have the facts and we understand what are the risks and what are the implications. I know that cluster housing has been mentioned as something to look into in the 2015 POCD, just as it was in the 2005 POCD, where they said cluster housing, particularly, I think it says particularly for seniors, is something that the town of Woodbridge should look into. So whether or not the Board of Selectmen thinks it's a good idea and goes forward, or the town does, we need to understand what are the implications, what do we need to take into account as we consider proposals that come before us. And this is a very important issue, and we wanted to get the best legal advice we could and the parameters as we discuss it. So definitely this is not, it's not based on any decisions, it's another fact that we need to have as we go forward.
Just as a follow-up to Maria's statement, that in Woodbridge, as you know, and as we all know by now, the town cannot sell property unless there is a special town meeting where the voters have to say yes or no. This opinion doesn't come into play at all unless the voters of the town say yes, this is something they want. And we thought that in order to answer some of the very valid questions that have been raised as to whether, if this is allowed at the country club, is it precedential, and will this type of housing be in my neighborhood? We wanted to make sure that we knew what all the ramifications of any decision to sell, and that's why we asked a expert on zoning to come up with his opinion. So that's why David is here tonight.
I certainly am not advocating one way or the other
Right.
on that. The only thing I'm saying is what the likelihood is if the town chooses to go in that direction.
Yes.
First of all, thank you for, I know we just saw this for the first time. It's very clear. I understand 99% of it. I do have a question, though, about one thing. So the fact that the town owns the golf course, I may be saying this a little bit backwards, but for all intents and purposes, it might exempt this process from what would otherwise be illegal contract zoning. So for instance, another golf course in town, which might be privately owned, would not be able to do the same thing that might happen at this property, because contract zoning is a no-no.
From the
Generally
perspective,
speaking. I'm asked the question.
Yeah, from the perspective of the agreement with the third party,
Right.
The party who comes in and wants to purchase it.
Right.
Not from the perspective of what the zoning commission can do, but from the perspective of a third-party purchaser, you have a greater flexibility. And interesting enough, over the years, I've done a lot of zoning on both sides, for towns and for developers. And when the towns act in sometimes, in a very limiting way, the developers often would say, well, if you won't let us develop here in the way we think is appropriate, maybe you ought to buy the property.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some towns have taken that seriously, as you did. I mean, this property was a significant property to your town. It's a large parcel. It's in a strategically important place. And the town, in my judgment, did a wise thing, acquiring that before somebody came in and said, well, we're going to put 500 units on 150 acres. I mean, 15 units per acre would not be unusual in some of the very dense housing projects I've seen. And that's what Richfield did. Richfield's property that was involved in the case that was the reason I was asked to look at this, was a 45-acre piece of property that had been a corporate headquarters. Nobody wanted to buy it for a corporate headquarters, even though it was an interesting building. One of the buildings was actually designed by Philip Johnson, so it was a very interesting parcel. But the town was very much concerned that somebody would buy it and develop it in a very dense manner. I mean, sewers were available. There were a lot of things that, made this property vulnerable, and so they stepped to the plate. They made an offer on the property, and I think acquired it for a reasonable sum. And by the time they're finished, they will recover everything they spent on the property. They'll have a modest development on it, because the people who came forth are developing only 10 of the acres for 54 units. And most of it will end up as open space and a resource for the town. So it was these can be excellent ideas. I mean, I'm not saying you have to do it, but oftentimes property is so valuable in terms of potential development that sometimes the towns have no choice if they want to protect what they see as the interests of the community, but to acquire them. And so by doing that, you gain more of an advantage than if you just simply hope that your zoning commission would regulate in a very limiting manner. So that I think it's a method for municipalities to protect themselves, and I think it's sometimes a very good one.
I'm not doubting any of that. My question is about the 10 years later, another golf course that we don't own. I mean, it's private property, right? And somebody wants to develop it. I think that's the concern of a lot of people in the town.
Well, that's where the zoning...
And that's really the zoning regulation issue.
That's where the zoning regulation, the plan of conservation and development, you've done the right things to protect yourselves in that regard. Sometimes that's not enough. And there are statutes, which I don't need to cite here, but there are statutes that give certain developers the right to sort of circumvent zoning. And this is a method to protect town.
Thank you.
I just have, to Susan's point, unfortunately, just because of some technical difficulties, this is the first time we're getting this report. Right. And I just want to ask the first selectman, when I get a chance to review it at home, if we have any additional questions, we could submit it to Ellen, who hopefully Attorney Roberts can answer.
Go through it. I was about to say that, and, there's a lot to this, and it is one of our most significant issues, and we will drill down, have plenty of time to look at it, and we can follow up in whatever ways we deem necessary.
Because I'm not an attorney, but I live with one. So. It's dangerous. Thank you.
And I just...
In fairness, we should be able to review it. And ask more questions next time. Yeah,
definitely. Just in terms of this is not apropos of what you've said, but I did want to make the record clear on a couple of other things to people here and to the public. Bob Hill came up tonight to say, maybe the first proposal is the one we should have done after all. I do want to say that no developer that has come to the town is willing to do that proposal. Right. So perhaps people are having second thoughts and think, gee, I should have voted for that before, or perhaps they're not. But it does require a private developer who's willing to do it. The other thing is, there is a proposal, just so people are aware of it, that would be, I think it's 69 units, something like that, close to 70 units on about 30 acres of the parcel. That would leave about 120 acres of open space for the town that we could use in various ways, with or without the building. We'll have more discussion about the building. It could be, we could let it become real open space, not country club with trails and bike trails. We could perhaps have an ice skating rink. We might be able to have other facilities there. So there are ways to look at this property that I think address the concerns of all Woodbridge residents, both our financial concerns, our open space concerns, and people who would like to stay in town. Whether we go that way or not is a very open question. As I said, we have hit pause to get all the facts so that we make an informed decision, and most importantly, when this goes to the town, if it does for a vote, that our town residents have the information they need to be well informed about what is a very big and complex issue for the town. So we'll have plenty of time to read it, study it, we'll come back with questions, and thank you very much. This was very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go back to Louisa, and then we'll do the clubhouse. So this is item number 3 on our agenda. Louisa Cunningham is here. She has chaired our ad hoc committee on best organic practices. We have the report, and before you begin, Louisa, I just want to thank you so much for your work and the work of the commission. I think you've given us what certainly appears to me to be the gold standard for organic practices at Fitzgerald. It may be aspirational in some aspects at this point, but it's wonderful for us to have this, and we welcome your summary and presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to make recommendations about wildlife promotion and organic methods in the town of Woodbridge. I'm chairing the 7-member committee, and we did submit to you a 5-page proposal, which I've tried to boil down to a much briefer report. Our general recommendations include one, that the property be, the oversight of the property reside in one department, namely the Parks Department, reporting to CUPOP. This would assure coordination of use, such as the activities, the leases, care, and maintenance. We recommend training for town staff in the identification and removal of invasive plants. Indiscriminate clearing destroys valuable wildlife habitat. But invasive plants like barberry and burning bush that all of us are familiar with make it difficult for native plants to grow because they monopolize the sun, water, and nutrients. Plants that are not native...
I'm sorry, Louisa. Jerry got a text that the sound is not being received at home on TVs. There's a problem with the sound.
No, I think some of it is, but it's hard to understand.
We're just oh, so you just did something about it now? Maybe it's correct. I'm sorry,
Louisa. The
Lisa.
sound on television is distorted. So maybe
we got that message.
Oh, you got the message. Okay.
We might be doing it.
There's actually people listening. Good to know.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Louisa.
No. So again, we recommend oversight of Fitzgerald reside in the Parks Department to assure coordination of all the activities, and also training of town staff in the identification and removal of invasive plants. Invasives make it difficult for native plants to grow because they monopolize sun, water, nutrients. But plants that are not native don't host the insects required by higher levels of the food chain, such as birds, so they're particularly problematic. It's one of the reasons nurseries like non-natives, because they don't have pests and they grow pest-free, but we pay a price for that, or at least our wildlife does. Therefore, to the extent possible, invasive plants should be removed, especially at the field's edge. Where necessary, natives should be planted to discourage further invasives. I should just insert here, the 5-page proposal made mention of using herbicide to help with the removal of the invasive Norway maple, and that was an oversight. That will be removed by the committee. When clearing is done, the cuttings should be used to create occasional brush piles for sheltering wildlife. This is fairly common practice at nature centers. In order to promote wildlife, such as birds and butterflies, mowing should be limited to the period between mid-November and March for meadows, and for hayed fields after July 1st, with a cut no lower than 8 inches for butterflies who lay eggs at the base of plants. We believe the town should revisit the negotiations for a 22-acre easement of Fitzgerald's wetlands with South Central Connecticut Water Authority, particularly as development of wetlands, as we all know, is already restricted by town guidelines. This arrangement would produce revenue from the Water Authority. Patch cutting of the trees, something generally recommended by DEP and Audubon, would diversify the age of trees and therefore wildlife. A cut of approximately 5% or 5 acres of Fitzgerald 100+ acres is recommended. Signage at the entrance of Fitzgerald about its ecology, flora, and fauna would be of interest to those who are drawn to the park and potentially assist residents in managing their own properties. I'd like now to return to recommendations for specific areas, moving from the southwest section, the farthest field, to the northeast along Center Road. The southwestern field, again, the farthest field at the end of the road as you pass the community gardens on the right, is the most logical field to be developed as a meadow. We recommend several cuttings there to create a naturalized area conducive to wildlife. So minimally, no more than once a year, and there might be a strip that's cut every other year and possibly even one every 3 years. This would be something the Parks Department would have to work to see what is feasible. We recommend the path around the edge of that southwesternmost field be mowed to 2 to 3 tractor widths to reduce exposure to ticks, but allow an area for people to walk, run, etc. The creation of a soft edge around the meadow for wildlife is also recommended, and that involves medium height trees, again, dogwood and cedar, native flowers, and shrubs, some of which are already in place, partly thanks to our Adam Parsons, who's been working at this on his own. Moving next to the community gardens, we recommend given the town's no pesticide policy, that the gardeners sign an annual agreement that includes the same no pesticide clause that's required of leasing farmers in our town. To create a more naturalized look and support wildlife in the central meadow across from the community gardens, we think there should be 2 to 3 islands created with native plants and, again, medium height trees such as red cedar, dogwood, bayberry, butterfly weed. The rest of the meadow being mowed once a year so that other trees and bushes can't grow in. The finish line for Amity High's track team, we think, should be moved to the parking lot to reduce disruption of wildlife, to say nothing of, others. This would also result in the central meadow not looking partially shaven at the end of the summer in preparation for the track meets. For the sake of wildlife and pedestrians, we recommend a gate and proper signage be installed at the edge of the parking lot just before the beginning of the road next to the rink to limit use of the road to just gardeners. Stickers for their cars should also be provided. If the rink should require improvement sometime in the future, such as walls or an enlargement, we recommend moving it to another town property such as Pease Place. Earlier, the golf course club was mentioned. Letting that very special wetlands area adjacent to the rink expand for the ducks, migrating birds, and other wildlife. There's some really wonderful native plants in there now that very actively attracting wildlife. The northernmost fields, those on Center and Beecher Road, evoke Woodbridge's farming history, and as such we recommend continue to be leased to farmers while being overseen by the Parks Department to assure that they're properly maintained, possibly involving annual soil testing and remediation, cover crops, or nitrogen-fixing legumes like clover. The DEEP wildlife biologist we consulted with recommended warm season grasses for this area, such as little and big bluestem, but it's actually something the committee needs to revisit as we start looking at other fields in Woodbridge. And for the sake of wildlife, these fields should be mowed as late as possible. Again, I'm talking about the northeasternmost along Center and Beecher. Ideally not before July and no more than twice a season. So thank you for considering our proposal.
Thank you. Are there questions? Before you go, let's, questions from the board.
I have a few, but just to clarify though, this proposal is being presented by whom besides you?
Okay, I'm sorry. The Best Organic Outdoor Management Maintenance Committee was charged by First Selectwoman Skeletor so this proposal is one that the 7-member committee prepared.
So it hasn't been offered to COOPOP yet, or
no, it was last night.
Incorporated in the COOPOP's plan of what they're trying to do as well. But this is something you're hoping the two of you, COOPOP, with your proposal, will work together to come up with a comprehensive proposal?
I was just submitted to them because I learned that they were meeting last night. So I presented it last night, and the reason we focused on Fitzgerald first was because I'd been informed that they were going to be reviewing Fitzgerald this month. So there are still probably going to be a few adjustments to this, but the bulk of it stands.
Okay, thank you for that.
Maria, did you have a question?
Louisa, I commend you. This is a great piece of work.
Thank you.
And I am so happy that it's based on a Yale study that came from the Conservation Commission when I was there. I'm very pleased about that. But as I understand, the reason that there was a cost for creating your ad hoc committee was because of the concern that happened in the community gardens. I thought that was the impetus of this. And while you've addressed the whole organic, etc., for the property and a management plan for it, I do not see very much detail on the community garden.
So the reason for that, I already presented to you my personal thoughts outside the purview of this committee about the community gardens.
Right.
But the charge, and this has been a challenge for our committee because there are among those members some feelings about the community gardens, but we remind ourselves that our charge has to do with wildlife promotion and organic methods for the areas that we're reviewing. So we've attempted to do that. In the case of the community gardens, again, we've tried to underscore that there should be language in the annual signed document by users that it uses the same language that's in the leases for the farmers that use town property, having to do with organic practices. It's very good language.
I'd like to explain the impetus for this. And it came from two things, actually. One is about 2 or 3 years ago, Louisa and I ran into each other on the Fitzgerald property, and Louisa said to me, pointing to the field across from the community gardens, wouldn't this be wonderful as a wildflower garden and attracting butterflies? And I said that would be incredible, and it's been on my mind since then. And I took the opportunity finally to ask Louisa if she would follow up on that and, of course, look at the entire property. And the second reason is because of my long-term commitment to organic practices, which I think are so important and that we need to promote in the town. I was fortunate and very delighted when I became First Selectman to see our excellent town policy on organic practices, something we had to modify, and we came to a good compromise on that. But I wanted to be sure that we all understood what are the best standards that we could aim for. And that was the impetus for this ad hoc committee, Maria.
I must have misunderstood because I thought all this, all this discussion and stuff like that was because of how the community gardens were being used.
No.
It was not, Maria. You did.
So is that a different issue then?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
But can I just, it seems timely to sort of jump in on the COOPOP piece of this.
Okay,
in
great.
their review of Fitzgerald.
Mm-hmm.
And I attended the meeting in my liaison capacity last night. Louisa made this report last night to CUPOP, and I may as well just tell you the whole thing. So CUPOP is addressing the community gardens. They're setting up guidelines. They're still in draft form. The point person has been Laura Ferrante Fernandez, and she's really done a marvelous job. And I think what the various members of CUPOP are struggling with now is how long should these guidelines be, how detailed, how much micromanaging should there be. I think there's a sense that there should not be micromanaging, that it should be naturalistic. However, the text that they were struggling with and working with does reference this report. So if this report is ultimately adopted and CUPOP adopts their guidelines, that will all be, as well as one or two other reports, by the way, about about gardening practices, etc. So that's my liaison report. Can we go home?
That's great.
We're at the end.
I thought that this was an important thing for this
I
property.
did have one question of Louisa last night that I didn't get a chance to ask you. Where is the Amity finish line that you've referred to in your report? I have no idea where that is.
You might have noticed late summer, beginning of the fall, it's the northern edge of the center garden. So right across from the community gardens,
Right.
on the other side of the road,
Right.
a large swath is mowed for
Right.
the receiving of the finish line.
The circle?
No, it's not the full circle. It's just along the road. And because it's grown up, the meadow has at that point with milkweed and asters and goldenrod, they have been mowing it. The Parks Department has had to, because that has been the finish line for the track team.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
Yep, don't go. I want to thank you. This is marvelous. I think
My
it's
pleasure.
wonderful. I read it today, and I loved every minute of it. It's a lot, and I'm hoping we're gonna drill down as a group and decide where we want to begin, because obviously there's some costs involved in a lot of these. I wish we could do it all at once, because it's great. This is part one, and if I could ask, what's left and how much fun you're going to have doing all? What are the other parts, if it's not too lengthy for you to?
We were encouraged to look at the other publicly owned properties, but we're focusing,
okay.
thanks to Mrs. Shaw and Adam Parsons, they've laid out for us on a couple of maps where the larger tracts are, and we're identifying the other least farmlands. But we also hope to get to roadside management and where organic methods might be applied. So we're right now just collecting information on that topic and working with NOFA, DEEP, a variety of different organizations, Audubon and so forth.
Thank you, and thank all your committee members as well.
Well, they've been a terrific committee.
Keep at it.
Very impressive reports.
Thank you. No, she keeps back. Get me out of here.
Louisa, I'm sorry, but the reason I asked the question at the beginning about if this was before or after you've met with CUPOP, and if there was a collaboration yet, I would have and do have additional questions on 3, 4, and 5 suggestions made as far as stickers, a gate, the removal of the ice skating rink. But I think I'm going to withhold that because you just met with CUPOP. There's no real final collaborative suggestions being made yet. So, but I will tell you that I do have some questions on how you would handle some of the details of this and if it was feasible. But that was only the reason I asked you if you had met with CUPOP.
To respond just really quickly, some of the ideas that came out. One of the things that became clear to us as a committee, people have observed how quickly the cars are driving on that road and how there's been abuse, basically. And it's, our charge is wildlife promotion, but it's also disruptive for the pedestrians, to say nothing of something of a risk, I think. But there are a couple possibilities for the gate. Adam Parsons has suggested that that gate would, much like the water company authority, could, if it were closed, have a combination. But initially, the thought is maybe it would be open with much clearer signage about who's allowed, and with the addition of a sticker, if, for instance, there's a community gardens committee, they may determine that it makes sense to either have a sticker on the card or something on the bumper, on the dashboard, but would help with that monitoring as well.
Can I just address kind of a process point of view that goes to these, you know,
Yep.
What I love about this is that it's very process driven. You're looking at this at a very granular level, then it's going to COOPOP, which is sort of going to a broader level. Ultimately, any of these bigger decisions are going to have to be decided by this board. So these may be recommendations which may serve the population that uses this at a very intimate level, but yet from a larger town point of view, we may not want to do. And so it's important to understand the context, I think, of what the presentation was yesterday and how it leads up to where we are today, for clarification.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
why I was wondering.
Right. So even if COOPOP incorporates some of the organic practices, it's aspirational, I think, with with respect to some of the other pieces that you put in there. Did I not? I mean, I think that's correct.
I think you're right.
I'm going to ask you just two quick
Yes.
additional things. In that respect, as we look through this, do you have any suggestions as a top priority or a place to start? I know we can't do everything at once.
Certainly the center field would give us the opportunity to help people see what could happen on Fitzgerald and make people aware of the issue of natives, invasives, and the impact on wildlife and so forth. All of us who are concerned about the wildlife component of this, would love to see that wetland area not just preserved, but ideally return to what it was before the rink was installed. And I've heard a little bit, I don't have any idea if there's any truth to it, that there might be a possibility of kind of upgrading the rink, putting up walls to make it safer if people are playing hockey, or maybe, I don't even know if it might need to be enlarged. But if that day comes, the committee felt very strongly that another location should be considered for the rink, because the property is so naturalistic. It's where people go to relax and exercise, that more man-made kind of structure, by removing it, gives us the opportunity to do more with the wetland entrance, in a way, to Fitzgerald.
Thank you. And finally, you mentioned Adam Parsons.
Yeah.
And I know that after you inspected the property with the person from the State Department of Environmental Protection, he was very complimentary of Adam. Perhaps you could just share with us his comments at the time.
Yeah. The clearing that occurred at the edge of the field, the southwesternmost field, the farthest field, was disruptive for the wildlife, and people who were observing them noted that. But in fact, a lot of that was invasive, and already natives are growing back, and the wildlife biologist, Peter Picone, noted, applauded, patted Adam on the back, because there are blackberry and black raspberry and all sorts of good plants growing back in that section. So it's a question of kind of, again, staying on top of that and managing it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For your patience this evening. Again, if there's no objection, I'm going to ask David if he can just wait for one more quick item, and we will go to item number 5. I think that Will McLean is here. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, first I have a few handouts for the selectmen, just to of what I have. Just a map of.
Thanks. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I didn't get it.
So, just to start out, I am from Troop 63, and my Eagle Scout project is to build a walking trail bridge on the Blue Trail on the Fitzgerald property, and I marked it on the map where it would be. It would go over a stream in the woods behind the meadow, just to let you know where it is. So I met with Mr. Walter, who is the town trail master, and he actually suggested this project for me because in the past there was a bridge that was a log, but it had rotted away, and since the over the stream, it's a pretty steep area. He felt that a bridge would be very nice for the town to have for the people who are walking on the trail. After that, I looked at different bridges around town, including Brendan Purcell's project, which is on Orchard Road, and the bridge behind the Darling House down the Litchfield Turnpike. I got a rough draft of the design. I presented to my troop last month, and I got approval. I refined my design with Mr. Tucker, so he helped design this bridge with me. So I know that I'm in pretty good hands with this design. I also presented to the Woodbridge Land Trust this same sort of thing, and I got funding approval from them. So all of the fund, and they're sponsoring it. So all the sort of funding for this project there will come from them. And in addition, I got the approval of that from them for this. I went a few weeks ago. I met with Ms. Sullivan here to talk about what would be needed for approval for the wetlands, because it's on wetlands property. And she said that I need to go to wetlands after presenting here, because in order to fill out the application, I need the town's approval, or I need the owner of the land approval, and since it's public land, I need the town's approval first in order to get that approval as well. Are there any questions?
Now, let me just tell you, I know the bridge on Litchfield Turnpike, and it's a wonderful bridge, and I always wish that most of the bridges that they make around town should be like that. And if this is anywhere like it, where do I sign?
Any other questions?
I have one.
Tony?
How long is the bridge, and how long do you think it's going to take you?
The bridge is planning on being around 30 feet long.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it says right here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's right there.
Underneath that.
Trying to get him
It says
30
right.
Thank
Yeah.
you, but
And it'll be around
Sometimes other people
four
do.
feet
Get you
wide.
home early.
So
Sorry?
it'll be around 4 feet wide.
All right.
And I plan on starting it, if everything goes to plan, to start building it in March, because I can build it in segments in my garage and then transport it as far as I can to the trail and set it up there. And I can, but my goal is to try to finish it by the end of the summer.
How many scouts will you have working with you?
As many as possible. But I don't need that many, but probably around 8 to 10 would be ideal.
Great.
I have a question.
Sure.
When it's done, will you take pictures and bring them back to
Of
us
course.
so we can see them? Because I think we'd really like to see the project.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Anything else?
Is that it?
Very much. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you go, maybe you want to hear us take a vote?
Oh, sure.
Oh, that detail.
Is there a motion to approve Will McLean's proposal to repair the bridge as he described to us this evening?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor?